the lesson I'm giving everybody this evening is women working wonders.
Nice.
Women working wonders. There's a beautiful quote and it says, "A woman is like a tea bag," and I like that. A woman is like a tea bag. You can't tell how strong she is until she gets into hot water.
Wow.
That's Eleanor Roosevelt. And I think it's so true. Like, we see our strength and what we have inside of us when things get hot. You know, when the pressure comes. We know that diamonds are made under pressure. And I love the Proverbs 31 woman who is exemplary. And Amy mentioned her today, Amelia mentioned her, who's literally known for working hard, working with eager hands, wakes up early, stays up late, and her arms are strong for her tasks. And I love how Sade mentioned about women today as well, and just how ultimately you describe women as the heartbeat of when Jesus was walking in his walking ministry, and I thought that's so beautiful. Wow. And I think Luke 8 describes such the heart of women's ministry. So beautiful. And I want to look this evening at two women who actually worked together in the Bible, but what went wrong? So let's jump to Philippians 4.
Let's go.
We're going to look at a few women. But let's look first of all, two women who actually worked together. They were like partners in the gospel. But Paul prayed for them. And let's pick it up in Philippians 4, 1-3. It says, "Therefore, my brothers and sisters, you whom I love and long for, my joy and crown, stand firm in the Lord, and in this way, dear friends. I plead with Euodia and I plead with Syntyche, to be of the same mind in the Lord. Yes, and I ask you, my true companion, help these women, since they have contended at my side in the cause of the gospel, along with Clement and the rest of my co-workers, whose names are in the book of life." So we see that Paul was pleading for unity here. And these two women, he was praying for them to be of same mind. The ESV version says for them to agree again in the Lord. So clearly there was some kind of like quarrel, disagreement, disunity. Whereas before, they'd literally been working side by side, clearly very powerfully, to the point where Paul saw that this was like an urgent thing. These two sisters need to get unified because they were being used for the gospel. Like, these two sisters need to get back together and work side by side again. And I love that Paul clearly saw that as a priority. I think it really highlights that women work very powerfully together, but there can also be challenges that come in working together as women. We are very emotional, we're sensitive, we can hurt one another's feelings, the list goes on. But God really wants us to be so united, to be used powerfully. Like, unity is what God values the most. And I believe it's unity that actually makes us most effective, more than anything else. That's what God really blesses. We see that in Acts 2, right? You don't actually see in Acts 2 the fellowship of the believers, that they were working really hard, all of these things. You see that they were working hard in prayer, and they were so unified, and the Lord added to their number daily. So I believe unity, worship, is actually what makes us so effective. But yeah, we could be working so hard and be disunified, and then literally what's the point? I like what Amelia said, like, you can just be like sharing your faith like crazy, but they're not praying. So what's the point, you know? And all hard work yields a profit. But equally, we want to be spiritual about God's work. And I think just as Paul pleaded for these women to agree in the Lord and be unified, we too always need to fight for unity so that we can save souls. So I want us to ask ourselves initially, where do you see yourself struggling in working as a team? Like, if you think about now in Bible studies, whatever it may be, like working together as women, where do you struggle the most? And I wanted to look at I believe, a very powerful example of women in sports who really mastered how to like work side by side. And I was reading about these amazing Kenyan women who were running in Berlin for a marathon. And they actually set a world record because though it was a single race, and it was like an independent race, they were still focused on pacing with one another. They trained with one another and they supported one another, which led to them like hitting a world record. And it inspired rural communities. It brought attention to other African women to be athletic racers as well. So though it was a single race, they still paced together, they trained together, and they wanted to help one another. So we see the power of unity there. But what I thought was incredible was to read about Serena Williams and Venus Williams. I can't remember the name of the story, the film. King Richard. Yeah. Wow. You just see their story, and there's so many insights. Because they were originally working together, like partnering doubles, and they've got so many awards. Like they've literally had 14 Grand Slam doubles titles, 3 Olympic gold medals in doubles, and ranked many times as the number 1 as double teams, like various times. They're like legendary tennis players. But what's so powerful about them is that they had this mutual support, even within a competitive arena. So at times, they actually were both in the finals and played against each other. Like you guys obviously know that. Actual sisters in the finals playing against each other. But even in the midst of that, you hear them say they would share their secret move with each other. They would support each other, like emotionally support each other. So though they were competing against one another, they wanted one another to win, which is so powerful. And it's literally like this legendary thing that they both competed against each other, and they really supported each other. They shared strategies, as I shared, and they helped one another to recover from injuries and losses, even though they were in this competitive arena. What's also beautiful is they complemented each other's strengths. So Venus is known to have like a strong net game and reach, but Serena brought this like explosive power and consistency. So they complemented one another, and it made me think that's how we are in Bible studies, right? We all have different strengths. You may see something that another sister doesn't see, and that is so powerful in helping a woman to become a disciple. Like each and every one of you has a unique thing to bring in a Bible study to help a woman. Just like Venus and Serena, they both had a synergy. You know, we need to have synergy in Bible studies, not competing, not trying to like be the one who's like the best, but like seeing this synergy, like working together is so, so powerful. They also shared values and vision. So their dad, Richard Williams, raised them not just to win, but to elevate each other. That's how he raised them. It's like, it's not just about you winning, it's about you both elevating one another. And their goal was not only personal glory, but changing the face of tennis for women. So they had this vision, and I spoke about vision today. So when we're unified on the mission, it takes away us trying to get any glory. We're just trying to do it for Jesus. And another beautiful thing is that Serena actually chose to really humble herself. So they're working together as doubles and then went into singles. But then Venus, her sister, got an autoimmune disease, which basically resulted in Serena no longer doing singles, but joining doubles again. And I thought, how beautiful is it? This is after she had won the finals. So she was getting all of this glory, had won so much, was like really very powerful as a singles tennis player, but then thought, okay, my sister has this autoimmune disease, I'm going to now do doubles. And it made me think, wow, like 1 Corinthians 9, we become weak to the weak. And it's just this idea of like, are we down on people who are weak? Or do we try and like lift one another up? It says in 1 Thessalonians 5 verse 14, to help the weak, not rebuke the weak, to actually support the weak. And her final saying, or like one of her quotes after winning a final, was, this is Serena speaking, she's the only reason I'm standing here today. She's the only reason that the Williams sisters exist. Awesome. So she knew, even though she'd won the final, that she couldn't have done it without her sister in the first place. And I think we need to understand that ourselves, you know, that even like if you're personally fruitful, you're the person who met that person. None of this matters. We all need each other. You know, we talk about gang tackling a lot, but I love that Serena had that heart. She's like, though I've won, I could not have done it without my sister. Keeps us humble. Are we even willing to be like Venus, though, who was helping Serena, in a sense, to win? And it makes me think about John the Baptist. He like prepared the way for Jesus. We need to have that heart to like elevate our sisters, to work behind the scenes for them to be elevated. That's actually the heart of leadership, you know. I want you all to do better than me. That's like the heart of how we should see one another, to elevate each other. But let's look in the Bible now at examples of women in the Bible who worked side by side for the gospel. So first of all, I want to look at the Hebrew midwives. Let's jump to Exodus 1. And I know we had Patricia studying the Bible, who is a midwife, which is pretty cool. So in Exodus chapter 1, We'll read verses 15 to 21. It says, "The king of Egypt said to the Hebrew midwives, whose names were Sapphira and Puah, 'When you are helping the Hebrew women during childbirth on the delivery stool, if you see that the baby is a boy, kill him. But if it is a girl, let her live.'" I feel like that's kind of society today, feminism, like kill the men, keep the women alive. The midwives, however, feared God and did not do what the king of Egypt had told them to do. They let the boys live. Then the king of Egypt summoned the midwives and asked them, "Why have you done this? Why have you let the boys live?" The midwives answered him, "Hebrew women are not like Egyptian women. They are vigorous and give birth before the midwives arrive." That's like goals. I've been following a lady on Instagram and she's like incredible. She doesn't believe in midwives. She's like had 4 natural giving birth naturally at home in water. She doesn't even believe in them. The midwives checking when she's ready to push. She's like, my body would just tell me when. It's incredible. But this is, wow. I guess because I'm about to give birth, this is like on my heart. Verse 20. "So God was kind to the midwives, and the people increased and became even more numerous. And because the midwives feared God, he gave them families of their own," which is so beautiful. So this made me think, okay, these are physical midwives, right? And they was, in a sense, very fruitful. Like they helped many young babies to stay alive, and they feared God. And I think that's what's so powerful. They were unified in the fear of God. It was that unity and courage that saved many lives. But what I really love also is that they were creative and shrewd, which I believe we need to be as spiritual midwives, because we are called to be spiritual midwives, to literally help give birth spiritually, right? So that we can save souls. And they were creative and shrewd. They were shrewd by kind of saying, well, yeah, they gave birth before we even got there. And they were creative in the way that they were thinking. And I think we need to learn that as sisters, like the way that we study the Bible with women, we need to be creative and shrewd. I think we need to learn in many ways to have more tact. Learning, okay, how do I speak to certain individuals, certain women of different nations, you know, if a woman's a lot more timid, like we need to be careful how we speak, and especially different nations as well. Colossians 4:6 says, "Let your speech always be gracious, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how you ought to answer each person." I think this is something we really need to go after, is learning how to speak to individuals, knowing that everybody's different, and it's an art, it's a craft, and we learn over time. But it's knowing, okay, was that necessary to rebuke? Should that have been an encouragement? And really learning that, which I'm going to talk about in a moment. But going back to them being midwives, I was thinking about how, midwives literally have to work together. And if they didn't work together, that's going to affect the safety of the baby and the mother. And midwives need to, obviously, they work in shift patterns. And that made me think, wow, often, because this is what my midwife said when I gave birth to Finn, that often the women at the beginning of the labour don't get to actually see the baby give birth. So they've helped with like all of the contractions and for however long that woman's in labour, because some women are in labour for like days. Please, Lord, not this time, okay? It can be a long labour. But my midwives were amazed because they said this is one of the few times where we've started the shift and we've actually seen the baby give birth. That's how quickly Finn came, because he came in 3 hours.
Wow.
They were assessing whether I should go home, and then they came back to the room. They're like, okay, you're about to go. Like, Finney's entering the world. And they were amazed that they could be at the start and the end of the shift and actually see the baby, which was amazing. But I thought, okay, spiritually, how does that apply? Imagine you've led all of the Bible studies, but then you needed to change shift and you don't get to be on stage, right? Like we talk about that a lot, but that should be our heart. It's not about us getting the glory at all. We may change shift by one sister's leading the study and then another sister takes over. That's totally normal. And it's not something to feel insecure about, just as like the midwives. Another example of 2 women working together is Ruth and Naomi. So let's jump to the book of Ruth. You guys know how much I love the book of Ruth. But I actually studied out Ruth the other day from the perspective of Naomi, because I think so often we focus on Ruth. But I was thinking I read through it just thinking, okay, let's see Naomi's characteristics. And it was crazy because that morning Anna sent me a voice note about Ruth, and I know that you had a great family time. And I was like, wow, that morning I just studied out Naomi. Wow. It was really powerful. But they walked side by side. Let's see that in Ruth 1 verse 19, because we're talking about, women who worked side by side. Wow. Ruth 1:19. So the two women went on until they came to Bethlehem. So they were going together. When they arrived in Bethlehem, the whole town was stirred because of them, and the women exclaimed, "Can this be Naomi?" And we know she goes on to say she was feeling quite bitter. And I think so often we can focus on Naomi as like being this bitter woman. But as I studied it out and like really looked at her characteristics, I saw how she was a really amazing discipler, a really amazing spiritual mum. Because, Ruth is known for her loyalty, but for somebody to show such loyalty, I believe somebody needs to be giving them so much love. Mm-hmm. And Naomi said, go back to your literal physical mother town. She said, no, I'm staying with you. Mm-hmm. That just shows how much of an amazing spiritual mum that Naomi was to Ruth. So I love to study out that perspective from Naomi's point of view. Mm-hmm. So we need to ask ourselves, for those who do disciple somebody, how loving are you to that disciple, to your disciplee, your spiritual daughter? And she actually let her into her life as well. Well, we won't go there, but they literally lived together. And she let her in at a time that she was obviously not doing too well, but she was vulnerable. That's why I can struggle as your guys like spiritual mum. I can feel sometimes like I don't want to be vulnerable or to be seen weak, which has always been my pride. And that's why having children is so good for me, because you literally don't have a choice but to be weak and to ask for help. But I love to have her vulnerability. So are we eager to be vulnerable to one another? And Naomi really cared about Ruth's life as well. We see that in chapter 3, verse 1. One day Ruth's mother-in-law Naomi said to her, "My daughter, I must find you a home for you, where you will be well provided for." So she really, and I feel that's so powerful, because so often as disciplers, we can focus a lot on doctrine, which is important, but what about life as well? Mm-hmm. Like life and doctrine, 1 Timothy 4:16. And this is really important, that we really care for one another's life as well. Like have vision that those that we disciple will get married, that they're going to have a home for themselves and be well provided for. That should be our prayer and goal for one another. But let's now look at the perspective of Ruth, the disciplee. So how was she towards Naomi? In Ruth 3 verse 5, she says, "I will do whatever you say," Ruth answered. And is this our heart towards our discipler, that we will do whatever they say? Do we want to learn from our mentor, from our leader, or do we think that we should be the one teaching them? Mm-hmm. Or are we fired up when they take over a study? I know I talk about this a lot, but I think it shows a heart of teachability when you're not have an issue with somebody taking over a study, because you're fired up to learn from them. I remember Michelle would do that plenty of times when she was training me up, and I'd always just be fired up to listen and learn, because that's how it is, it's training. So we should be fired up about that. In Luke 6 verse 40, it says, "The student is not above the teacher, but everyone who is fully trained will be like their teacher." And that really should be our heart, to want to be like our teacher, and for the teacher to want to raise them up, to elevate them, just like we saw before as well. But I actually want to lift up Sade. Sade's been, you've been a disciple for how long? 7, 8 years? 8 years. And I just want to lift you up, because you have such a humility and a teachability, despite like all of your experience. You've baptized women, and yet you still seek a lot of advice, and you still just have a real teachability, and like you really embrace feedback, which is very humble. And I know that you like worked out a lot of things in your quiet times as well. But it's powerful. So I really just want to lift you up today, because I think some pride is coming out in some of our discipling relationships. I've spoken about it before. My pride came out when Luke would disciple me. God was purifying my heart. But I think some pride is coming out, and there can be an outward pride where you just straight up like don't want to learn from one another, or if it's like interrupting Bible studies, not being teachable. Or there could be a dismissive pride. That's a bit more subtle. I've been discipled on that before, where you're kind of like nodding your head, but then you don't actually do the thing that you've been asked to do. And obedience isn't seen through words, it's seen through actions. So I want to ask today, how is our obedience? Sometimes it takes a lot of trust to obey. And it's not to say just like follow blindly and don't have a conviction behind what you're doing, because anything done without faith is sin. However, how is our obedience? Because God's love language is obedience. It's not about the person. However, do you see God speaking through your discipler? Or do you see it as a person? Because you really need to work on that, because God sent disciples for a reason. He speaks through us. Does God feel loved by you by your obedience? And I love that Anna literally mentioned Noah. Literally in Genesis 6, I believe. Genesis 6. And he did everything just as God commanded him, which is a beautiful example. Obedience produces breakthroughs and miracles if we choose to trust. Because sometimes you may feel like, I don't know if I agree with that or whatever it may be. Obviously, you need to see it in the Bible. But reverent submission always brings that breakthrough and that miracle that we want to see, whether it's in our character, whether it's in our ministries. But pride, this kind of pride can actually bring disunity. But I want us to really imitate the women that we saw today, that we learnt about, even the women outside of the Bible, right? There was the Kenyan marathon runners who literally supported one another, which set world records. There was Serena and Venus Williams, and their sister unity set that remarkable success, and they're like legendary because of their sister unity. The Hebrew midwives, whose unity on the fear of God literally saved many lives, and Ruth and Naomi's discipling relationship, which literally led to Ruth's son being in the genealogy of Jesus. So we see the fruit of that submission. It's literally birthed Jesus Christ. It's so powerful. Ultimately, just as we saw again with Serena Williams, she quoted that though she won the finals, she couldn't have done it without her sister. And we too cannot do it alone. So I really want to stress on that we as sisters cannot do it alone. I cannot do it alone. I need each and every one of you. God again has given you all such incredible qualities, incredible things. Literally, you're an incredible friend to women. You're an incredible teacher of how to share faith. You have great zeal. It's beautiful. Each and every one of us have something to give. Ife as well. You're going to help many women. We love you a lot. So yes, that was my charge.